The first of today's country being the first one being Indonesia, and yeah. Starting off with history, the first people to arrive in India arrived about 40,000 years ago when sea levels were lower and all. And they joined, and it was a joined to Asia by a Latin bridge and all. And then at the last of the ice age, about 10,000 BC, a new wave of people came in, and at first they hunted animals, collected shellfish, and gathered plants for food. But by about 2500 BC, they learned how to grow such as like the taro, bananas, millet, and rice, and the early farmers also made pottery. But the tools were made of stone. However, by 700 BC, the Indonesians had learned how to make bronze and iron, and furthermore, at the time, the wet rice cultivation was introduced, and Indonesian villages were forced to cooperate to regulate the supply of water to their fields. And in this time, organised kingdoms began to emerge. And by about 400 BC, the Indonesians traded with other nations such as China and India, as Hinduism and Buddhism were introduced to Indonesia, and they took root and all. And by the 8th century AD, Indonesian civilization began to flourish. Among the kingdoms was a Hindu kingdom in central Java called Salandra, and there was also a great Buddhist kingdom called Sriwijaya in South Sumatra. And from the 7th century to the 13th century, Sriwijaya prospered and became a maritime empire controlling western Java and part of the Malay Peninsula, and it became a centre of Buddhist learning. But by the 13th century, the Sriwijaya Empire broke up into separate states. Meanwhile, by that time, Islam had been brought to Indonesia by Indian merchants, and it first gained a hold in Aceh, spelled Aceh, in North Sumatra, and in following centuries it spread throughout the west of Indonesia. However, in the 13th and 14th centuries, Hindu kingdom flourished, and it was called the Majapahit Empire, and it was founded in 1292 and soon rose to dominate most of Indonesia. But early in the 15th century, the Majapahit Empire went into a rapid decline. And in the early 16th century, the Portuguese started to arrive in Indonesia. And at the time, there was a huge demand in Europe for spices such as nutmeg, ginger, cinnamon, cloves, and mace. And huge profits could be made by transporting them from Europe and transporting them to Europe and selling them. As the Portuguese therefore decided to seize the Moluccas, the chief source of spices. And in 1511 they captured Malacca, which was an important port at the time, and they also captured Moluccas. However, in the early 17th century, the Portuguese had lost their position to the Dutch, and at first the Dutch fleet sailed from Holland in 1595 under Cornelis de Houtman. And in 1602, the Dutch East India Company was formed to control trade with Indonesia, and in 1605 they took Tidore and Ambon from the Dutch, and in 1619 the company captured Batavia. In 1641 they took Malacca, and during the 17th century the Dutch gradually extended their power of Java to Moluccas. However, they had little influence in the rest of Indonesia. And moreover, during the 18th century, the Dutch East India Company slipped into debt, and finally in 1799, the Dutch government took over their territories. And in 1806 the British and Dutch went to war, and in 1811 the British under Sir Minto sailed to Batavia, and the British soon captured all the Dutch possessions in Indonesia, and the British abolished slavery, and they also divided the country into the areas called a residence for administration. However, in 1816 the British handed Indonesia back to the Dutch. Many Indonesians resisted the return of the Dutch, but the Dutch eventually defeated them and regained control and all. But in 1825 a Javanese war in central Java began, and it was led by Prince Diponegoro. However, the war ended with a Dutch victory in 1830, as Diponegoro went into exile and died in 1855. And furthermore, during the 19th century, the Dutch extended their control to other parts of Indonesia, and in 1825 they took Palembang in Sumatra, and they also fought wars with the Balinese in 1848, in 1849, and 1858 and 1868. However, Bali was not finally conquered until relatively recent, like 1906. So yeah, as Bali was not fully conquered until like 112 years ago. And in 1873 the Dutch went to war with Aceh, and the war went on until 1908, sorry. Meanwhile, in 1894 the Dutch captured Lombok, and in 1905 they captured the whole of Sulawesi. Meanwhile, the Dutch shamelessly exploited the Indonesians, and in 1830 the Dutch introduced a cultural system, as Indonesian farmers were forced to put aside 20% of their land to grow crops for export, and they were paid only a nominal sum by the Dutch government for land, as Indonesians were forced to grow coffee, indigo, tea, peppermint, cinnamon and sugar, and so the rest of the measure rice production was reduced. However, in 1870 the Dutch switched to a free market system, as the Dutch government's monopoly on sugar and other commodities were ended, and private plantations were created. However, the Indonesians were not necessarily better off, and now they were employed as coolies on the big plantations and all that. And in the 20th century the Dutch decided to treat the Indonesians more fairly, and they introduced what is now called the ethical policy, and it meant building schools and spending more money on healthcare, sanitation and irrigation. However, the new policy had little effect on the lives of most Indonesians, but it did mean that some Indonesians became highly educated and familiar with Western ideas such as liberalism and socialism, and as a result of the early 20th century nationalist movements were formed in Indonesia, and they began clamouring for independence. And by 1940 the Germans had occupied Holland and all, the Netherlands and all. In 1942, 2 years later, the Japanese invaded Indonesia, and lost Dutch troops surrendered on the 8th of March 1942, and at first the Indonesians welcomed the Japanese as liberators, but they soon grew disillusioned, as the Japanese were brutal and they ruthlessly exploited Indonesia's resources and all. And yet when the Japanese were losing the war, they started to favour Indonesian independence, hoping to make Indonesians their allies. But Japan surrendered on the 15th of August 1945, and young Indonesian nationalists were determined to assert the country's independence before the Dutch could return, and a group of them kidnapped 2 nationalist leaders, Sukarno and Hatta. And on the 17th of August, Sukarno declared Indonesian independence. However, he became the first president, and Hatta became vice president. And the Dutch were not willing to let Indonesia go so easily, as the British troops on Indonesia. They tried to remain neutral although there were armed clashes between the British and Indonesians in place now. Was it by November 1946 the British were gone and the Dutch had landed many men in Indonesia. In November the Indonesians and Dutch signed the Linggarjati Agreement as the Dutch recognised a new republic, but only in Java and Sumatra, but they still claimed the rest of Indonesia. The Mal Agreement stated that the republic would join a federal union with Holland in 1949. And neither side were really happy with the agreement, but the Dutch built up their strength in an attempt to retake all of Indonesia. In the summer of 1947 they invaded the independent areas. However, they were forced to withdraw partly because of the Indonesian resistance and partly because of strong international condemnation, especially in the US and all. In December 1948 the Dutch tried to retake Indonesia, but this time the Indians turned to guerrilla warfare and they were successful in it, and the Dutch faced strong condemnations from powers like the USA, and they realised that they could not win the war. And finally, on the 2nd of November 1949, the Dutch agreed to recognise Indonesian independence. The troops withdrew in December 1949. At first, independent Indonesia was a parliamentary democracy. However, in February 1957, President Sukarno introduced a new political system which he called guided democracy, as the power of parliament was reduced and his own power was greatly increased, as his opponents formed a separate parliament called the PRRC, the Revolutionary Government of the Republic of Indonesia. However, the army remained loyal to Sukarno and he stayed in power. And in October 1957, the army took over the remaining Dutch companies in Indonesia, and as a result the army grew wealthy and all. In the early 1960s the economy faltered and inflation grew rapidly. And in September 1965 the communists attempted to hold a coup in Indonesia, but they murdered a number of generals and they also seized strategic points in Jakarta. But General Suharto quickly took action and the coup was crushed, as Suharto was granted powers by President Sukarno to restore order, and the coup Suharto arrested and executed large numbers of communists. But Sukarno lost support, and in 11th of March 1966 he signed over his presidential powers to Suharto, and in 1966 Suharto ruled as a dictator, although there were elections held every 5 years, as democracy was only really a facade at that point. However, Suharto brought stability, and under him the economy of Indonesia began to recover. And also in the 1960s, reserves of oil in Indonesia were exploited, and in 1973 Indonesians benefited from the high prices of oil. And agriculture also became far more productive and all. And as a result, many Indonesians remained poor, and in 1997 Indonesia was hit by a financial crisis as a result of the economy, the economy contracted. And Indonesia was hit by riots, and Suharto resigned in May 1998 as democracy returned to Indonesia with elections which were held in 1999. At the beginning of the 21st century, the Indonesian economy began to recover once again, and today the economy is still growing steadily now, and the population stands about 261 million, somewhere around there. And yeah, moving on to language, as there's about estimated 700 languages used in Indonesia, most of which are Austronesian languages. As the jure official language in Indonesia is the Indonesian language as indicated in the Indonesian constitution, as the language is the most widely used language in the country, and is used in all forms formal communication, particularly in media, administration and commerce. However, there are all main languages used in the country, such as Javanese and Sudanese, which have millions of native speakers. And and Indonesian Indonesian language is one of the major languages spoken in Indonesia, as the Indonesian language is also formally recognised as the official language of the country, and is provided for by Article 35 of the Constitution of Indonesia. The language is categorised by linguists as a standardised register of Royal Malay, and is among those languages of the Austronesian language family, as Indonesian is one of the more popular languages in the world, with about 43 million people in Indonesia being identified as native Indonesian language speakers, while another 156 million use the language as a second language, as Indonesian language has a rich history in the country and was used as a lingua franca in Indonesia for hundreds of years. As a language, it's popularly used in print and electronic media in the country, and is also incorporated into the education curriculum of the country, as the official language as Indonesian is a language used in all formal communication, as well as in the drafting of legal documents. The language was adopted as the official language in Indonesia in 1945, after the country gained independence and promulgated its constitution, as the majority of native Indonesian speakers reside in the urban regions of the country. And moving on to the more regional language, the first of which is going to be talking about is Javanese. As Javanese is a major language in Java, Indonesia, which is primarily used in the island of Java. Among the Javanese people, as a language, is also one of the most widely used in the country, with about 98 million Javanese Indonesian people being identified as native Javanese speakers. And all Indonesian peasants since the country gained independence in 1945 have been native Javanese speakers, as Javanese is also recognised as the official language in East Java as well as Central Java, as Javanese is a Sunda-Sulawesi language, and is categorised under the Austronesian language family. And the language is also made up of distinct dialects, all of which are mutually intelligible, and these include Central Javanese, Western Javanese and Eastern Javanese. And traditionally the language was written in Javanese script, but in recent years the languages use Latin script and its written format. Then there's Sudanese. Now, Sudanese is another major language spoken in Indonesia, as translating to mean language of Sunda, and is predominantly used in West Java and Banten, which is a language recognised as official regional language, as there's an estimated 42 million native Sudanese speakers in Indonesia, which is about 15% of the total population of Indonesia. And the Sudanese language is made up of 6 main dialects, all of which are geographically defined and include the southern dialects, the north-east dialects, the mid-east dialects, the Priangan dialects, the northern dialects, and the western dialects. And then there's like 1 or 2 other major languages spoken in Indonesia. Sorry for butchering, there's Minangkabau and Musi. As other languages used in Indonesia includes Musi language, which is a Malay language predominantly used in Palembang region in South Sumatra, and has an estimated 3.1 million native speakers. And another major language used in the country is Minangkabau language, as Minangkabau is used by the members of the Minangkabau ethnic group, who are estimated to be about 5.5 million people in the country. And yeah, quickly going over legends now, as we're going to be talking about the Indonesian moon goddess legend. Similar to its neighbours, the Indonesian culture has their own folklore and legends pertaining to the moon, as the people of Java and Bali has a folklore that is centred on the Indonesian moon goddess legend, which has become an important element of Asian culture. According to Indonesian folklore, Rati is a Balinese goddess of the moon, and the legend goes that the demon named Kalarau stole a large portion of the elixir of immortality, called Tirta Amrita, and when the act of wrongdoing came to Rita's attention, she informed the great Lord Vishnu. He threw a magic discus to the demon to cut off his head with it. But since Kalarau had already had part of the elixir, his head became immortal while the rest of his body died away. In an attempt to exact revenge, Kalarau chased Rati across the sky and managed to catch her several times. This belief was held in Balinese culture, arts and all, for a long time. And to this day, many narrate the story of how Kalarau occasionally catches and swallows Rati, causing a lunar eclipse, but because he's just a disembodied head, he cannot hold onto for too long. And to this day, during the lunar eclipse, the faithful believers of the legend in Indonesia pour the lesung, it's like a utensil used to powder spices, which symbolises Kalarau's body. The tradition goes that the demon feels pain when the people pound the lesung, and the minute they stop pounding and she escapes, the lunar eclipse ends. And yeah, that is Indonesia, and yeah, I'll see you soon for the second of the countries, and yeah, bye for now.